Hello everyone, welcome back. This is another update video for TerraFirmaCraft Plus. Hasn't been that long since the last update, but I've been working pretty hard on this, and I have a lot of ideas that I want to share with you guys, and I want to release this update. So in the last update, we introduced the idea of being able to heat up a vessel on top of a fire pit like this. This is a vessel of water, and I've actually added a number of new recipes that use this functionality. So the first few have to do with alcohol. So alcohol has been in TFC for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. A very long time. But it wasn't really what I wanted it to be when I added it originally. And I've really put it where I think it's fine now. So to make some, well, we're going to start by making some beer. And we're going to take our barley grain. Previously we would have ground this into flour. We're not doing that right now. Taking the grain, putting it in the hot water, and sealing it, and that's going to get us some barley malt. I actually, gone ahead and pre-done some barley malt. To note, though, that if you put a full stack, 160 ounces in here, you're going to get back, I think, 20% more on top of that. So, there is like a bit of a gain in that regard. But we're actually going to have to cook this barley malt. And do we have... Yeah, I'm going to need also another barrel of water. So let's just... yep, but we're in... Oh, that was the wrong one. Yeah, we're in survival mode right now. Okay, so let's make sure that's not going to burn. It's very slowly heating up. In the future, I kind of plan to have like different darknesses of beer come from how dark you cook the malt. And like, I guess this would be like the pre-roasting step, but or the, I don't know. We're kind of skipping the drying step. Normally you would after you like steeped the grain, you would like dry it out for a few days, but that sounds kind of boring. So we just went directly to like the sort of cooking part. Anyway, we'll throw it in here, seal it up, output beer. So that is that's how that works now. I'm not gonna let this actually finish. Let's just get rid of it. Put that right there. Because let's actually go back into creative mode. I want to put an empty vessel on top. I believe that we actually have like a full-on barrel of beer right here. So we're going to fill up some beer inside here. You can see it would, it'd make vinegar just like normal if we left it open. But instead, we're going to put a vessel adjacent to it. We're going to grab a blowpipe. We're going to put the blowpipe in the input slot and seal it. And that is actually how you start a distillation recipe. So if you have a valid vessel somewhere adjacent to it, you've got your vessel with your liquid inside or your items or whatever, with the lid on and a blowpipe in that slot, you can start distilling liquids. So this is already starting to generate some barley whiskey. It's boiling off some of the beer, and for every 200 units of beer, we get 75 units of barley whiskey in this side. So all of the higher tier alcohols are going to be made in this way. So that's going to be... there's actually a lot of them now. There's quite a number of alcohols. In fact, this, yeah, you can see here, if you aren't cooking the barley and you just have it sealed in water, you'll get barley wine. So that's unmalted, that's just pure grain. This is a little less efficient than if we had malted the barley, because if you remember, malting the barley increases the volume, so you wouldn't need quite as much. In fact, we actually don't need this much grain. I think we could use half a stack of grain here, and that'd be fine for this amount of water. You'd want to use like a full stack if you're doing this in a barrel. So you have barley wine. If you distill barley wine, you get vodka. In fact, all of the grain wines, aside from the rice wine, which is still sake, distill into vodka, as well as potato wine, which you can get by sealing a cooked potato in some water. We have cane wine, which is made from sugar cane. Oop, let's not get burnt. We have Well, if you take apple cider, you can distill that into apple jack. If you have agave, you can make agave wine and distill that into tequila. So there's actually, we can look at all the different alcohols. So we got here, so that's water, obviously. You got beer, rice beer, wheat beer, corn beer, rye beer, barley wine, cane wine, agave wine, potato wine, wheat wine, corn wine, rye wine, cider, applejack, rum. So rum's from cane sugar, the cane wine, I guess. Rye whiskey, rice whiskey, barley, sake, shochu. Shochu is distilled sake. Vodka, berry wine, brandy, berry brandy, whiskey, and corn whiskey. So those are all the new alcohols we have. Alcohol does have a bit more purpose now. In fact, if we go into creative, let's just grab some glass bottles, and we will go back into survival. Let's put a glass bottle in, put that into the output mode. So we have a bottle of barley whiskey. So beer goes into barley whiskey because beer is made with barley. If we'd had wheat and made wheat beer goes into regular whiskey. Currently, there's no real difference aside from the name and the color between them. But let's drink this and see what happens. Oh, wow. So we just drank an entire bottle of whiskey. You can see we're very drunk because drinking an entire bottle of whiskey is kind of insane. We also got some experience out of that. So drinking alcohol, drinking beer, drinking distilled alcohols, you get experience. The amount of experience you get is different. So if it's a distilled alcohol, that's considered a tier 2 alcohol, and that will give you a lot more experience than if you had consumed tier 1 alcohol, which are going to be like the beers and the wines and stuff, or cider. We do have blur on. That is kind of a feature that didn't entirely work as very well back in the day, that you'd get your vision blurred. In fact, we almost got up to wasted on this, so we just have very drunk. This has gone out, so I'm going to relight that. Alright, so we've got our fire relit here. You can see we've nearly distilled all of our beer. Okay, so there are a few other distillation recipes though, so I'm going to get rid of this. Let's actually go into, that's not the game mode we want. Let's go into creative, take this back because I want to get some salt water. So if we put our salt water vessel here, so if we just look at this right here, straight up, that's just salt. If we have the lid open, we can boil this off and get some salt out of it. However, in the amount of time that will take will depend on, oh, there's a little bit left, but we'll just throw it away. Will depend on how much water you have, but that's not really what we're going to look at here. We're going to put our blowpipe back, we're going to seal it. It says freshwater again, or it says freshwater now, it said salt before. And that is because we're going to be distilling this water. So this will happen a little differently. It'll actually happen bit by bit. So for every, I don't know, I guess like 500 millibuckets of salt water, you'll get 450 millibuckets of fresh water. You'll also get 1 piece of salt. I think in terms of conversion, that's a little more salt than if you had just straight up evaporated it. No, it's not. Sorry, it happens faster, but it's the same conversion. 500 millibuckets of salt water per salt that you get back. But yeah, so if you, I don't know, are somewhere in the middle of the ocean, you find a little island, you have a bit of wood on you, you can make a fire, but you don't have any water left, you can distill it out of salt water, and you will get salt back if you need to preserve your food. So that it makes salt a little easier to get, although it is pretty intense, for an entire bucket and all that time and all that wood you need, you only get like 10. So it is still a lot better to just, if you can find a rock salt biome and just harvest as much salt as you need. Looks like, yep, our drunkenness has worn off. Or rather, we're no longer, yeah, we're still drunk, but we're not very drunk, so our vision is not blurred. Of course, we have this barrel of salt water here, or vessel. Might be a good time. Do we still have, yeah, we still have this beer here. Because I want to show that with beer, it's a little easier on the body. We did just go back into very drunk. Actually quite high up again, but I was able to show you that our water went up. So when you are drunk like this, in fact, actually, let's for a little while, let's just drink a lot. Let's just drink. Oh yeah, now we're wasted, and that gives us like a phosphor effect, and I can't turn this off if I want, even if I wanted to. That's just something that happens now. You can also see as I move, I'm only like, I let go, and we're still wobbling around. In fact, you can't really walk in a straight line. I'm just holding the forward button right now. Can't really walk in a straight line. You also have some other issues when you're this drunk. Like if we go over to like this chest, they'll say, "Oops, oops." In fact, it's really, I guess we're pretty wasted on this. It's having some difficulty opening that chest because we are so blasted. Yeah. So we've got that. We've got, I guess, we're getting kind of hungry here. As we can see, we got 6 salt out of that, and is that? Yeah, it's not enough to evaporate anymore. So let's actually go into debug mode for a sec and set the time to day. That should get rid of the drunkenness that we have. Leave debug mode, go back into debug mode, make sure we reset our stats. Okay, so that's what alcohol's like. In the future, when as I make experience level, careful there, as we make experience levels a little more important, I think that's going to be a pretty useful thing to do. I mean, maybe not be drinking whiskey all the time, unless you really need some levels or something. But although it is a little more efficient in terms of liquid, I think the amount I think it's like 500 units per bottle of alcohol, and the conversion of 200 to 75. Like in terms of how much experience you get, it is more efficient. You get more experience by converting your beer into whiskey and drinking it that way than you would if you just drank the beer straight up. Although you do kind of get quite drunk, and if you don't really like the blur, maybe not such a great idea. In fact, if you are going to get drunk, we got some vinegar because we left this barrel open. If you are going to drink, it might be a better idea to do it at nighttime before you go to bed, so that the time skip will help get rid of some of that drunkenness. But anyway, we have some other things that we're going to demonstrate here. Let me just quickly check if this is going to work. When I'm testing, I'll often change or tweak some variables in order to have some certain unlikely events happen more often. And so I just want to make sure that, for demonstration purposes, we still have that on so that we can see some stuff happen. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump off a high place. Normally, what's about to happen would not happen every single time. We have a minor fracture here. So that is an injury that we've incurred. You can get a minor fracture from taking fall damage or crush damage. It has to be at least 20% of your max hit points for the injury to get applied to you. If it's less than that, it's assumed that it's not bad enough to actually cause that sort of injury. I mean, it'll still subtract your health. The minor fracture, I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm actually moving more slowly than I would have otherwise. It's just a minor fracture, not that bad. But let's talk about what we're going to do about that. You also may notice that it still just says 2. It's not counting down. This is not getting any better, and that is because we have not done anything about it. If you don't set the bone, then you can't allow it to get, it can't get better on its own. And to do that, we're going to take some string and a stick. Combine them together, we get a splint. So we can splint our leg. Oop. And now it says M fracture T. That means treated, and that means that our injury is now ticking down. And the penalty that we had for movement is no longer being applied, so we got full movement again. However, if I got injured again, this would turn into a regular fracture instead of a minor fracture, and then that one splint we have wouldn't be enough anymore, and our movement would be impeded again. And of course, then you can just straight up break a bone. In that case, you have a lot of problems, and your movement is going to be pretty bad. There are actually two other kinds of injury that we can get. In fact, we have some poles in here. So let's convert some of these poles into wooden spears. Throw them up and try and catch them with our face. That didn't seem to do enough damage. So let's try and throw it a little higher. Oh yeah, there we go. Minor wound. So that's actually going to deal damage to us every 5 seconds or so. And in order to deal with that, at least in this part of the game, we're going to need to find a tree with our knife. Right-click on it until we get some resin. Combine the resin with some straw. Get a primitive bandage. And then after applying the bandage, the time remaining on our wound has been reduced to 30 seconds. So it starts off at 90. If you can apply a bandage in the first minute, it will reduce whatever time you have left down to 30 seconds. And if this, instead of a minor wound, was like a moderate wound or like a very bad wound, each time you applied one of those primitive bandages, it would also reduce the severity. And more severe wounds deal more damage over time. Or actually, they deal damage more frequently during the length of time that you have them. So that is how we can deal with that a little bit. We also have another thing. So let's talk about that splint we made. If we didn't have any string, I mean, you could use sinew, but if maybe you got that injury from attacking an animal and now you haven't killed an animal and you don't have any sinew, then you may feel kind of stuck. If you get badly injured and you feel like your movement is being penalized here, there is another way that you can sort of combat the penalty, and that is by making a wooden staff. So the wooden staff previously was made with a pole and some leather straps. I've changed that to make it possible to make it earlier in the game without having leather. If we get some resin from a tree, all we need to do is combine that with the pole, and that is what gives us our staff. So holding the staff, it does give us a 15% walking movement speed buff. No bonus to movement when you're sprinting, but if you have a fracture or a broken bone, it will also help alleviate some of the problems that injury would impose upon you, on top of the basic bonus that you get. So you're using the staff as a bit of a crutch, and that helps you move even though you have a fracture. So there are two other kinds of injuries other than a fracture or broken bone. One of them is just bleeding. The other one is a cut. The cut you can take from having slashing damage done to you. Bleeding you can have from piercing damage done to you. Bleeding is a little worse than having a cut. I guess like the instead of being like a flesh wound, maybe you've been stabbed quite deep down. Maybe you have some internal problems going on. But that primitive bandage that we made is only the first way that you can deal with it. So let's take some cotton cloth, and we have our knife, and we're going to start cutting into the cloth like this, and that gives us 6 bandages. So if you have a bandage and a wound, you can hold right click, and that will immediately get rid of the wound. Doesn't matter how severe it is. But you can also, if you take your bandage and you put it into whiskey or any other kind of distilled alcohol, you can turn it into sterile bandages. And sterile bandages will also, fully heal one wound that you have. one cut or bleeding wound that you have, but you can also apply them to instantly get back 100 health. So that is something that you can take with you, and if you need some instant health, instant healing, that is something that the sterile bandages can do. And so I think that was kind of necessary. It is a little bit more late game. You know, you do have to make alcohol and then distill the alcohol and then make the bandages and then soak the bandages in the alcohol in order to get access to that. But I think I think a lot of people will enjoy this change. In addition to the mechanics with wounds that I've explained here, animals can also get wounded. Unlike players that have more resistance to getting wounded, if you can deal, I think, at least 50 damage to an animal that with a pierce or a slash attack, it will get wounded. It'll take damage over time, and eventually it can die from its wounds. I feel like this makes it a little better if you're going to be attacking an animal like a cow. You don't have to just sit there and whack at it with a spear until it dies, until, you know, this does 112 damage. But, you know, you're not going to have to, like, whack at it with, like, a stone spear or whatever, or a wooden spear, until it dies and hope that you can deal 3,500 damage to it, which is how much health the cows have. That'll be 35 hits. This thing only has 20 health. You know, you'd be sitting there a long time and hoping that the cow is not able to hit you back. So instead, every time that you poke that cow with that spear, the cow is going to get wounded, and it will take some damage over time. And that may make it a little bit easier to deal with animals. So that is something to keep in mind. If one of your animals gets injured, you can take bandages or sterile bandages and heal their wounds. If you have sterile bandages, you can also give them back some hit points. It also will count towards familiarizing them when you do that. And in addition to that, when you are familiarizing an animal, if you hold shift and look at them, the familiarity heart's background will turn kind of pink once you familiarize them. This is kind of an easier way to keep track of which animals you've already familiarized, or if you need to still familiarize them that day. So I think that is kind of handy. With this update, we also have a change in bows. So bows, both the bow and the composite bow have had their draw time significantly reduced. However, while you're holding it at draw, your stamina will go down, your hunger meter there. So that's kind of a bit of a balance. And also, if you can look at my stamina and my thirst right now as I'm sprinting, they are also going down. I think, though, for both of them, they're... Okay, so something to explain about how stamina works. The stamina meter, once it gets to a certain point, the amount of time that the stamina meter represents gets bigger. So it may not be super obvious as you're sprinting that your stamina meter is going down, but it definitely is. So is your water, about 3 or 4 times faster than if you weren't sprinting. So that is something to keep in mind. Sprinting everywhere is not such a great idea. I mean, you can still run a lot of the time, but just keep in mind that if you do that, your stamina is going to get depleted. I kind of plan to add that functionality for a few other features as well, just to make it so that food consumption is kind of balanced against some of the things you want to do. But it's not like you only need a certain amount of food each day, and no matter how hard you work. Eventually, tilling the soil is going to be part of that. So you're going to need to spend some stamina in order to till the ground. And but when I do that, I'll add some other more automatic ways of tilling the soil, and that'll help balance that a little bit. So that's a lot to talk about. There are a few other things that I want to talk about in this update. And one of them involves sticks and string. So if we go like this with our sticks and our string, we make a stick loom. So previously looms required a saw and some lumber. If we place that down, you can see it looks kind of cool. It looks a little bit different. You got skinnier little sticks, and It's like the way they're tied together. But this item here, the stick loom, basically functions identically to the loom in previous versions of TFC. And the old looms now work twice as fast. So this allows you to get cloth before you have metal. I think that's kind of important. Looms were definitely made before, back in the Stone Age. Weaving is a very, very old practice. So this allows you to get cloth a little earlier in the game, which I think is a good thing. And then the other thing is we get 8 sticks here and 2 poles. We're going to make 2 wattle, and that gives us a wattle door, which you can place, you can open, you can close it. So this is a way that you can make a door without having metal. Currently the only disadvantage that the wattle door has compared to a regular door is that the wattle door cannot be activated by a redstone signal. So if you had, we can actually demonstrate that right now, because we'll make a lever. We'll put the lever, yeah, so, doesn't open or close the door. So if you do want like a pressure plate or something later on, you're gonna have to replace any wattle doors that you've made with like a proper wooden door. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy these updates. The wounds are kind of, I hope, an interesting mechanic. I think they are going to have a significant effect on how you do combat, especially if you are worried about getting wounded early on. I think it's nice that the staff is now something you can make early on. Changes, it's pretty significant movement boost we get here. Also changes to how alcohol works. Something you should notice is that corn whiskey does not turn into vinegar. It's too concentrated for the vinegar bacteria to have any effect on it. So you don't have to worry about leaving your corn whiskey unsealed, unlike the beer, which did convert into vinegar back there. So yeah, I hope, a little easier to get salt, a little easier to get fresh water, depending on the environment you're in. Some new changes to how kind of drunkenness works, distilling, all that cool stuff. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to leave a link to the update in the description. If you have any bugs or any problems or ideas, you can reach me on Discord. Please report the bugs that you find there. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like. It really means a lot to me. All the support you guys give is awesome. And I'll see all y'all next time.